So thank you so much for joining us this evening then for our inside track on SQE1 prep with Acuity Law. So the focus is going to be very much on Q&A with our SQE1 students here, but also I'll be giving, I have some slides to sort of share as well. So I've enabled closed captions, so you should be able to access those that want to. And as I say, I've got a few slides that I'll share just to give some really sort of key facts around studying the SQE, but the main aim really will be to allow our SQE1 students, Alistair and Alex, to really sort of share their experiences of preparing for sitting the SQE1 assessments. Many thanks for questions that have already been put forward when you registered for the session. I've grouped these together to be able to put them forward to be answered. Feel free to ask any further questions that you have in the chat as well. We'll try and pick those up during the session, and we'll also come to them at the end as well. And I appreciate there's a lot that people want to know around studying for the SQE. So if you've got a question that isn't quite appropriate for this session, I will make sure that I do come back to you. If we can't answer it this evening, then we'll still come back to you to answer those for you. So some introductions then. So I'm Nicola, I'm the Student Recruitment Manager here at the College of Legal Practice. My role is to assist with events like this, to be able to share information about our courses and about studying for the SQE. And also if you send through inquiries or call up to find out information about studying with us, then it would be myself or a member of the student recruitment team that would assist you with that as well. Alistair, are you okay to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So hi guys, my name's Alistair. I am a second year trainee now. I studied at Cardiff University, did my LLB there. Did a placement year at Hugh James in Cardiff. And then when I moved to London, did a short stint at a boutique firm and then joined Acuity, where I am now. I worked as a paralegal in real estate and real estate finance for 1.5 before starting my training contract 2 years ago now. I sat the SQE1 last summer, and I've just sat SQE2 last month, 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Brilliant, thanks Alistair. And Alex, yourself?
Yeah, of course. My name is Alex. I am, similar to Alistair, a second year trainee, currently in the dispute resolution team. I studied in the London School of Economics and Political Sciences in London before starting as a paralegal at Acuity Law, whereupon I became a trainee.
Brilliant, thank you. And then we've also got Sophie joining us this evening as well. Sophie, do you want to introduce yourself and just tell us a bit more about Acuity Law as well?
Hi, yeah, hello everyone. I am solicitor qualified on the 1st of February, so quite recently. Did the SQE with the College of Legal Practice. So I think I sat SQE1 in July, and then I sat SQE2 in the following August. So not that long ago. So I appreciate that you're all going through the studying now or looking at your options. So hopefully this webinar will give you some insight. And if you have any questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out for us. So I'm talking on behalf of Alex and Alistair, but we're a really friendly bunch of juniors here. So always do feel free to reach out. In terms of what Acuity do, so we are a commercial corporate firm. So whilst we do have a property team and litigation teams, we largely work for commercial clients. So if you're someone who likes business, who likes, really critical thinking, and, if you're wanting to work on some of the bigger sort of deals in Wales and beyond, I would really recommend that you take a look at our website if you haven't already. I know that our applications for this year, for 2027, I think it is now, have closed, but we do have events throughout the year that you can come along to, and then our applications will open, I think, about October time next year. We have offices in Cardiff, Swansea, Bristol, London, Liverpool, Leeds, Birmingham. I'm sorry if I've missed one there. So yeah, we're across the UK, a growing firm, growing really rapidly, and that's been really exciting. I mean, I'm sure Alex and Al will touch upon that as well, but it's a really great place to be a junior, a lot of responsibility, but with a lot of support. So yeah, if you have any questions about the firm after or the SQE after this, please do feel free to reach out to any of us.
Brilliant, thanks Sophie. Okay, so just introduce the College of Legal Practice then as well. So for those of you who don't know, we are a fully online postgraduate law school. We're built for online as well, and we specialise in SQE preparation. Our parent company, the College of Law, are the leaders in legal education in Australia. So we're really very experienced in delivering online digital learning. So we're all about accessible and affordable legal education. Obviously, traditionally, law is known for being a profession with many barriers to entry. So we do our bit to eliminate that by offering courses at an affordable price. And we also like to facilitate access to our personalised and targeted individual support as well, where students can access high levels of one-to-one tutor supervision. Now you'll see there's a number of logos on the screen there as well. So alongside Acuity Law that's there, we work with a number of other law firms and also organisations who have legal departments where we support them with the SQE for their staff. And also we work with a number of universities as well, where we partner with them and offer the SQE part of their master's programmes that they might offer as well. So I'm just going to give you a very quick overview as well of what's involved in the SQE route for qualifying for those that aren't too familiar as yet. So there's four parts, four main elements basically that make up that jigsaw there. And first of all, you would need to have a degree to be able to qualify through the SQE route. Now, it doesn't actually specify a law degree. The SRA don't have that as a requirement anymore. However, in reality, it's very difficult to be able to go through SQE preparation without that background sort of legal knowledge already. So because of that, we do offer a GDL law conversion course for someone in those sorts of circumstances. And I think we'll probably pick up from Alex and Alistair as well, just about how they sort of built on their undergraduate law knowledge and how that did fit in really with their studies towards the SQE. So then you'll need to take and pass the SQE1 and the SQE2 assessment. So obviously we'll be focusing on the SQE1 this evening. You'll need to have 2 years of qualifying work experience as well. Now, the good thing about the SQE route is you're not tied to when you do gain those 2 years of work experience. So sometimes we'll have, or people may have worked in, gained work experience that would count as qualifying work experience and then decide to go on to study for the SQE. Sometimes someone might work and study alongside and gain that qualifying work experience at the same time as working towards the SQE, or sometimes people might decide to just focus on those SQE assessments and then would be gaining the work experience after. So there's lots of sort of flexibility there. And then the fourth part, as always, is to meet the sort of standard suitability requirements as set out by the SRA as well. So I'm just going to give a brief overview as well as to what's involved actually in the SQE1 assessment here. So SQE1 is all focused on testing functional legal knowledge. There's 360 multiple choice questions that's broken down over 2 exams, and they cover 13 areas of law. You have to sit the exams at a Pearson VUE test centre. They are actually available worldwide for the SQE1, and there's 2 assessment periods each year, January and July. The current fees, the SRA have actually just recently increased them, so the next lots of assessment, the fees for the SQE1 would be £1,934. So I said it's 360 multiple choice questions, and for those questions there's 5 possible options, and they're all very plausible, and it's a case of having to pick out that single best answer. Due to the volume of questions, it equates to around 1 minute and 40 seconds per question to answer, which is obviously very swift. So I'm sure Alex and Alistair will be explaining a bit more about that shortly as well. And those exams are broken down over, it's 2 exams, 10 hours in total. So you would have one day where you would have 2.5 hour exams, and then another day of the same week where you would have the same again. And then I'm just going to touch upon as well about how we deliver our SQE preparation, because it'll probably make a bit more sense as well then when we go on to learning about the guys' experiences. So we have part-time and full-time options for studying towards this. You have weekly timetables provided, and you have multiple group live sessions with our expert practitioners, and then personal supervision sessions as well. So you'll see there's a bank of over 2,300 multiple choice questions to practice, along with access to a revision app as well. There's opportunities to undertake practice activities and assessments which replicate the SQE assessments, and you'll receive individual feedback from experienced practitioners. We also have an SQE readiness review built into the programme as well, whereby your supervisor will assist you to and give you some sort of feedback as to, based on the assessments that you've been taking as part of the programme, actually, are you ready to sit that next SQE assessment, or might you be better placed to just take a bit of a longer period of time to revise? Although all of our preparation courses are set to run to a particular SQE assessment period, you're not tied to taking it at that point. So sometimes people might decide, actually, I feel like I would rather have that longer length of time to prepare. So as I said, we offer a high level of personalised supervision. You'll have the surgery sessions with feedback as well throughout, and there's experienced solicitor supervisors. If you are self-funding out, you'll find that our course fees are pretty low. We include hard copy manuals at no extra cost, and you have 10 months continued access onto the programme with no extra cost as well. So then that's a bit of the background information, just to help depending on where people are coming at. So if I stop sharing that for now then, and we'd love to kind of hear really from Alex and Alistair. First of all, do you want to share, both of you, about how you have studied, over what period of time you sort of studied for your SQE1? Alex, should I go to you first? Or?
Yeah, of course. So I was with the 40-week course. So I sort of had a bit longer than the 20-week course, I suppose. So I found that better to fit in alongside working. So for sort of context, I was sort of working alongside my studying as a trainee. So I was in the real estate team, followed by the commercial team. Just having that sort of extra flexibility, just have a bit more time to take over, was better for me, especially when the job could be quite demanding at times. I think, it's quite easy to sort of think, oh, I'll just fit in study time after work or before work during lunch hours. And I think you've got to really consider that, sometimes your work will get busy, you'll lose time, you don't get time to focus on yourself. So I definitely sort of found myself sort of doing about half an hour in the evenings, usually as a regular, just sort of reading through notes. Sometimes it'd be an hour just when I can slot in, and then sort of spending more time on the weekends. So I sort of found myself, especially towards the sort of closer to exams, literally going to a nearby cafe and just getting myself like a coffee, and then just leaving my phone at home, taking my sort of notes, and sort of sitting there and just doing a couple of hours there. And I found that works really well for me. What are you, Alistair?
Yeah, I was also on the 40-week course, but this is where I'd probably say it comes down to preference, because, excuse me, sorry, I think I actually would have done better on the 20-week course, because I sort of need more pressure to keep myself going, whereas for me that having it that spread out sort of gave slightly too much freedom. But I think that's one of the big benefits of College of Legal Practice, is it gives that flexibility to either have the shorter course or the longer course. But yeah, I had the same.
Yeah, I'll just quickly jump in there because I did do the 20-week course. So it worked really well for me. I'm sort of more similar to Alistair. I liked that it was maybe a bit more intense, but I had the 20 weeks then when I first started my training to really get my head down and focus on my training, and then the latter part. But it doesn't, it came with its challenges as well. It is very intense. If anyone's told you that it's not, it just simply is, but it's manageable. Something I really regret looking back is not having a clear timetable and structure when I first started. I think that would have done the world of good and kept me updated. I think 20 weeks is intense, but as I said, it's really doable. There's a lot of support there. But as Alistair and Alex have both spoken about, there's pros and cons to both. So actually have a sit and think. I know there's the temptation just to get started and choose an option straight away, but actually sit back and think, what have you got coming up in the next few months? Is there something that's going to be, really demanding outside of work? Or is there something coming up, if you're paralegaling or legal assistant, and you've got a trial that's coming up in work that's going to be really demanding on your time, because then the 40-week course might be better. But, if you've got a bit of a clearer 20 weeks come in, then maybe that's a good time to, put the 20 weeks as an option.
Brilliant. Yeah, thanks for putting that sort of into context. I'll show a bit later on about our options in terms of study, because there's if you're wanting to study completely full time, we have a 13-week program, but like we've heard, we have a 20-week and a 40-week one as well, which all exactly the same cost. It's just spreading same course rather than content, but it's just spreading that study time out over that longer period, which allows you to select the best one to fit in with your own circumstances. And obviously we sort of mentioned about work life and what you might have coming up, but also obviously personal life as well. If you've got caring responsibilities of lots of other activities that you do as well, it's worthwhile taking all of that into account, really. Okay, one thing I didn't know if you wanted to touch on as well, which I should have started off with really, is sort of how you got your positions at Acuity, and I guess your thoughts on starting and studying for the SQE. Was you quite keen both to be able to study alongside working as opposed to just studying, and starting to work later on?
I'm happy to go first. So I sort of finished university and I felt like I was a little bit disillusioned with law, I suppose. I wasn't certain if it was for me. I sort of got hit by the tail end of COVID when I finished, so my final year of studying wasn't fantastic. And I decided I was going to go for a paralegal job and sort of get that experience. And I thought, well, if I do a year of paralegaling, I'll know pretty quick if I don't want to be in law. And so I sort of joined as that, and then I sort of built up my confidence and skills doing my sort of day-to-day work. And I think that really sort of pushed me to feel that I could become a trainee and then sort of become a solicitor later on. I think having that sort of, practical experience, even if, that may not necessarily be a year of paralegaling, for example, but, if that's just sort of getting some work experience or a back scheme or something along those lines, I think that's really, really beneficial, because I think it's, people have a sort of, you speak to sort of friends and family and they have a romanticized image of what law is. And they think it's like suits and going to court every day. And I think getting out of like practical experience to sort of understand what you're getting into and how you're going to be doing day-to-day work and how you would be studying, really, I think that's really, really beneficial.
Brilliant, thanks, Alex. What about you, Alistair?
Yeah, what did I do? I had planned to go traveling for about however long I can get off, to be honest, 3-6 months. And then I got a call from the HR of the placement year that I'd done while I was at university, and she was like, "There's a job going for you in London. It'd be wicked, right up your street." And I thought, I can't really turn down an opportunity. Now, the way it was portrayed to me, she's gone from the company now a while ago, was this job was a given. I didn't realize there was a 3-interview stage. But anyway, went through that, and I was like I am still motivated to continue working. So I will do that, and I really like the firm. And yeah, I applied for the training contract about a year and a half in. I just saw a question. Did you find working as a paralegal was beneficial? Just because it links into this.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I think working as a paralegal is so beneficial for doing both your training contract and doing the SQE, if I'm honest. Now, when it comes to doing the SQE, so I think all three of us have have property backgrounds. I know we've worked together. And that's one of the biggest modules in the SQE. And I definitely found that gave me a good foothold. That being said, that is only, I'd say, like 15% of the whole thing over 2 modules. So yes, you could say, look, you could learn that elsewhere, but it is nice to have a tiny little bit of that as well. But I found it most definitely beneficial for doing the training contract. There are a lot of normal just skills that people you don't even think, oh, I've got these in my head now, when you've started either a training contract or qualifying work experience, however else you do it. I found it was so helpful.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in quickly as well. Sort of the way Acuity does the SQE is you study whilst you work. So they sort of go hand in hand. You get a day and a half off a month for study leave. And so if you're doing sort of, our training contract is still quite a traditional training contract in the sense that you do 6 months in different departments. So, you know, as I was saying, if you're paralegal but just in one place, you might build a really good bank of knowledge in that area. But I think that's why our sort of hybrid model works really well, because, you know, for me, I'd had property experience, litigation experience, and corporate experience by the time I was doing SQE2. And the skills you just learn are invaluable, and just small things that you wouldn't really pick up on, sort of how to draft a letter, how to set things out in a way that's really easy for whoever's reading it to mark, but it also looks really professional. So just small things that really go towards giving you those extra points in SQE2.
Yeah,
having just
no,
having just sat the SQE2, I'm finding more people are doing other routes rather than going in as a paralegal, which has surprised me. Maybe I don't want to say I'm old, but I feel like I'm 2 or 3 years out now. But I still think that paralegal experience is invaluable. Sorry, Alex.
Yeah, no, I was just sort of saying, sort of similar to what Sophie was saying about how we sort of do the SQE hand in hand with the sort of training contract. I'm currently in dispute resolution, and sort of one of my sort of, you know, assessments today for SQE2 was to sort of draft a defense, and I had already sort of been doing that recently in my seat, so it was really helpful to have that as a refresher for SQE and also have a refresher for my seat. You know, the transferable skills, it just helps you in both ways, and it's really helpful.
And just just on a final point on that, I know that there's a lot of questions that people have whether paralegaling counts towards their qualifying work experience. I give this advice to everyone: if you are under the impression that your employer will sign it off, make sure you have that written down somewhere, and make sure it does actually stick to the SRA guidelines, that it does count towards your qualifying work experience. The last thing you want to do is spend a year somewhere under the impression that you are going to be signed off, and that's not what, you know, they thought was going to happen. So just make sure that if you have got qualifying work experience, it meets the SRA guidelines and you will have it signed off.
Great, Sophie. That's a really really good point to show. So I mentioned it earlier about sort of those that have studied for an LLB or haven't done so. I think everyone here did study a law degree. Can I ask how did you find that in terms of the knowledge that you already had, and then going into the SQE? Could you imagine having studied for the SQE without that legal background already? And there's also some questions that came through about how much did you need to have remembered, do you think, and do you think much of it was actually covered again?
Again, I'm happy to start first. So I studied my LLB in London. I found that a lot of it sort of retreaded it, I suppose, but from a practical point of view. So when you're studying at university, it's a lot of like, well, this is a bit case law, and you sort of analyze it in depth, and you sort of, you know, pick it apart and discuss it. Whereas I think with SQE, you're sort of really there trying to sort of learn the lessons from it and how it applies to practice. As to how much I sort of remembered, I think it was all familiar. You know, you sort of, it comes flooding back. I think everyone has sort of dreaded memories of university of doing land law and thinking what a nightmare. You know, it's dragging on. But actually, when you start doing the practical elements of it, it helps a lot. You know, you sort of remember, oh, freehold, leaseholds. That's how I view it. I think it's really beneficial. I think I would have struggled going into it having had no legal knowledge. I think it would have been doable, but again, you know, why put yourself through that?
Yeah, great. Alistair,
Sorry. I was just going to say a slightly different point on that, because if there is anyone on the webinar who hasn't necessarily got a straight law degree or an LLB, I did a law conversion. So my legal knowledge before doing the SQE came to about 20 weeks of learning. So it was slightly daunting, but the core modules in the GDL, if anyone online has done the GDL and is doing it that way, do help you with a lot of the modules. And a lot of the things people are learning, I don't know if you found this, Al, but some of the modules are quite niche. You know, you've got wills and probate, which before getting to, you know, doing the SQE, a lot of people haven't done anyway.
Yeah,
so,
no, sorry,
yeah.
definitely agreed. I didn't mean to sort of say that, you know, a GDL is you know, something quite daunting or inferior to an LLB, but I think having no legal knowledge as opposed to, you know, a GDL or an LLB, I think, you know, that's more difficult. But
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, some of it is definitely new. And I think you should treat it as such. But having sort of relevant legal backgrounds and sort of understanding how to read case law and sort of understanding the systems, I think is pretty essential.
Yeah, I'd agree with both, to be honest. I think having any legal knowledge beforehand is obviously going to help, like as we're saying, as a paralegal. That being said, the amount of case law are probably crammed to just write papers of notes for exams in my LLB, probably not relevant. And the hardest stuff in the SQE is stuff that isn't in I didn't do in the LLB, like the business modules and the property practice, conduct practice. So it never hurts to have more experience beforehand, but I don't think you're going to be overly missing out somewhat.
okay. And is there anything that's worthwhile doing before someone starts SQE preparation? Did anyone find that they were going back over old notes, or do you think that actually everything's sort of provided once you enroll onto the program?
I definitely found going over old notes and sort of like, you know, refamiliarizing myself with sort of topics and sort of getting up to date, just sort of reading as well on the SRA website and just sort of seeing, you know, what the requirements actually are and what you're sort of expected to do. I think that's really helpful just to sort of see it black and white and say, this is what the SRA wants and this is what the course is going to be made up of. And just sort of, I don't know, just trying to be sort of aware of like new developments in the area and just sort of keep up some of your legal skills and reading, I suppose. That never hurts. Just sort of having a bit of a sort of awareness of what's going on in the world and sort of legal issues. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I would agree with that massively, because I didn't do it and I felt like I was on the back foot from just like the first month or something, because I had just really hectic start. But yeah, I think trying to get an overview of what it is exactly you're doing, and the first step is being on a call like something like this, is pretty useful.
Brilliant. Okay. So we spoke a bit about sort of balancing work and studies. Is there any particular sort of techniques? I think Sophie's obviously mentioned it about sort of planning a timetable. Obviously, as part of the preparation course, when you're studying, there's a timetable of live sessions for you to attend, and a bit of a structure in terms of a structure in terms of the, you know, the units that you will study in what order. But then it's sort of down to yourselves, isn't it, to plan actually when you will do that self-study part, which is the main part essentially, isn't it, of the preparation course. Did anyone find a particular good technique for that?
Yeah, I think I ended up developing my own timetable, primarily because I'd use the Culp one as my basis, but my workload came in peaks and troughs. So there may be a few days or a week that I just simply was overburdened with work. But obviously with the Culp, all the recordings are online, so I could catch up. But so long as I knew when I was going to catch up, and that's what I just mean about having like my own timetable and knowing that. And what I will say is, people do sometimes slip and get behind. I think that is unfortunately natural because, like I said, we're all going at different rates. And I think the biggest advice I would say is not to get overwhelmed by being that week or two behind, because it's just about sort of chipping back away at it to get back to where you are.
Yeah, I agree with Alistair there. And I think that sometimes you've got to remember that you will be stronger as well in certain areas. So, for example, I as Alistair mentioned previously, I had a property background. So I did real estate finance for nearly a year when I was in real estate seats. And having that sort of head start on that sort of module and sort of having that sort of knowledge, I suppose, that really helps to sort of feel like, well, I still need to look at it, but I can allocate that time to another module which perhaps I've fallen behind a little bit on, or I'm not as strong on. And I think maybe you need to, if you are thinking about studying and maybe you do end up falling behind, just having a bit of practical assessment of where you are with those skills and modules.
Well, and there was lots of questions relating to kind of the intensity of the course really, and of preparing and revising for the SQE1. How intense really is the preparation course? I know you said actually the 40-week one, actually, you could have had it more intense potentially if you'd gone on a sort of a faster paced program. How intense was it for you all? How many hours a week do you think you were putting into studying? And then what about that sort of revision time, like before the exams?
Yeah, I think I sort of touched upon it earlier that I sort of did, half an hour to an hour each night, just sort of, doing that, and then sort of on weekends doing like a longer session, typically a Sunday, just because I had more time then. I think sort of being disciplined with that. It was definitely an intensive course, and before the exams, I did take time off, sort of just carve that out. Work gave me some sort of days to sort of, as Sophie mentioned, we get a few days per month to just sort of allocate to that. And I think that was really beneficial to just sort of literally focus all the attention on as well. And I think if you're working right up like the night before your exams, I think that's going to definitely be a bit of a struggle. So I think just think about that as well.
Yeah, like I said, I personally did I don't know if it's prefer or if it was just my way of doing things, is that I needed sort of more pressure to be doing that. So I was probably doing about an hour each night, and then a bit longer sessions on the weekend. But like I said, I was doing this more closer to the time. What I would say is about revision is I didn't want to risk it, so I did take, I think, 2 weeks off before both exams, and then so I basically had a week and a half for both exams, because there is a lot to be going over at the end.
Yeah, I think sort of looking back, and that did help me with, obviously I did the 20-week course for both SQE1 and SQE2. I'd not really done many multiple choice questions before. It's a really, especially best possible answer. It's a very unique, and I think that can be quite intense as well for people because they haven't done it before. It's overwhelming that they're all technically right. So, which one's more right? The way I did it, so you have MCQs at the end of every unit, and I did them sort of the first time. And then when I'd gone further in my revision, that's when I went back to those MCQs. There's so many MCQs and it's a great learning tool. What you don't want to be doing is getting into the habit where you're just memorizing the answers. So, you know, you're going into the exam thinking, oh, I get MCQs, I've got it, but actually you've just programmed yourself to knowing what the answer is. So the MCQs are a great resource. For SQE1, the more of those you can do, because things reappear, you'll learn things. It really tests your knowledge. So it is intense, but I think it's that balance, isn't it? I don't know if you, Alex, found this, that it's the balance of the MCQs versus the content. There is so much content, and to be completely honest with you, you're not going to learn it all. There is just no possible way, unless, you know, you spent every single minute of the day, and even then. But that's also the beauty of having 360 questions. You don't need to get them all right. I mean, even if you get a question that you have no idea, you've still got a 1 in 5 chance. And, you know, you might be able to take a few out through some educated guessing. So it's not the end of the world. Don't hyperfixate and, you know, add to that intensity and that panic if you haven't made your way through all the content. You know, try and, you know, I think we'll touch upon this a bit later on, but it's better to know 80% and not know the other 20% than it is to know 20% really well and not know the rest of the 80%. So think about that when you're going through it as well. If you've fallen a bit behind, try and get back overall and think, you know, actually what's likely to come up in these exams? Is it this tiny little point, or is it, you know, some broader concepts that I can try and get my head around? And sort of go from there. And I think there's a question in the webinar chat, whether we all pass the SQE first time, because I think that adds a lot of intensity as well and a lot of panic to a lot of people. The pass rates aren't necessarily great in comparison to the LPC. I did pass both first time, but there are people who haven't in the firm, and the firm's approach has been, it's okay, like take what you need, and then we go back to the drawing board, and that's a place you want to work. And, you know, I tell people who are looking for training contracts and vacation schemes, look at what they're doing with trainees who don't pass the first time. Because for me, I know I wouldn't want to work a place where if I did fail, because people have bad days, people have a bad experience, it can affect them on the day. You don't want to be in a position where you're scared to lose your job, or you're scared to tell your employer. You know, you need a support system, and that's why Acuity is great. So don't panic. Don't put that extra pressure on yourself about, I need to pass first time. You know, a lot of people aren't, and that's a sad reality, but the SQE is a mental game as much as it is an academic one.
Yeah, that's a good point, Sophie. And also, if someone, when you get your results for SQE1, there is 2 parts to it, isn't there? So should someone not pass both parts, they would just resit that one part. So that helps a little bit as well in terms of alleviating the pressure. As I mentioned as well, what we do have is this assessment readiness review that your supervisor would speak to the students about, just to try and help prepare you, because sometimes, you know, just life happens, doesn't it, where you sign up to a course and with all good intentions, and whether it's within the workplace or just within you know, your personal life, things crop up, and sometimes people haven't been able to apply themselves as much necessarily as they had been hoping to. Just on the MCQ, Sophie, as well, and all of you, how well did you feel when you actually went into that exam then? How well did you feel prepared from what you'd been practicing and the sort of MCQs that you'd been looking at, as to what was then coming at you on the day? Alistair, do you want to?
Sorry, yeah. I found I don't personally think, well, no, I wouldn't advise someone to do the SQE without having done a prep course, because the sheer breadth of content there is pretty unfathomable unless you're working through it at a steady pace with like a schedule or something that the college, like say the college, sets up for you. But even more importantly than that, the multiple choice questions they're all set up for you. There's loads of exercises from the college, and I think those are imperative, to be honest, because they are very similar to what came up. I'd probably say the only difference is that they were the ones that came up in the exam are just slightly longer versions than what the college provides. But that's not to say they were different in sort of difficulty, sorry. Whereas I knew my flatmate did it with another college, and he was really annoyed because he said the ones that he'd been practicing were quite a lot easier than the ones that came up in the exam, whereas I found college was pretty much on par, just length, like I was saying.
Brilliant. Anyone else anything to add on that?
I think I'm pretty similar to Alistair there. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're running out of time, and people have got quite a few cats, so I don't want to just repeat anything.
Yeah, that's great. And can I ask, what sort of support do you feel that you received from the College of Legal Practice then, through your your preparation studies? How prepared did you feel then for those exams?
Happy to take this. So I had a fair amount of support from my sort of one-to-one. So my mum was diagnosed with dementia, sort of partway through my course, and sort of had quite declining health quite quickly. And I sort of had a lot of support from my one-to-one supervisor, who sort of just helped me through it, sort of, put together a bit of a plan with me, was checking in with me about it beforehand, and I found that really beneficial. It felt quite personal. Whereas when I was at, LSE, for example, great university, but my supervisor had like a million other students who they were and they had their own research and work and stuff. So whenever I went to them, it was sort of like, who are you again? So it was nice to have that sort of additional support.
Brilliant, thanks, Alex.
Yeah, I would probably just add quickly onto what Alex said as well. Just don't be afraid to ask for help if you are struggling, if you have fallen behind. I mean, I was in a similar position to Alex where like some stuff had happened in my personal life and I'd fallen behind. And don't just sit there and sit in your own panic and your own worry, because that's what the college is there for. They're set up for, those plans. And when I did speak to my support system at the college, we had a plan in place. Well, okay, moving forward, why don't you focus on these areas, because that's the sort of areas where you haven't had experience before, and your MCQs are slightly lower in your practice tests. So why don't we focus on that? So don't be afraid to speak out to the college, but also to your friends at the college and your support system there. I'm pretty sure if one of you is struggling with something, there might be someone else in that circle who's struggling with that topic or struggling with the workload, and just use each other as like assets, really.
Brilliant, yeah. So there's some questions about sort of whether it's an online exam and things. I think it'd be quite useful to find out how was it when you got to the assessment centre, like what happens, because I've heard things from other people that have surprised me actually in terms of how strict things are and things in the actual assessment. Could one of you walk us through your experience really?
Yeah, happy to. So I sort of sat mine in the sort of Cardiff centre. So I'm based in Cardiff. Sort of as an early start, I think you got to sort of keep that in mind. You want to make sure you leave in good time. You have enough time to sort of get to the centre. It was in winter. It was raining. It was pretty bleak and dark out. So you want to make sure you got coat and stuff as well. Just practical implications as well. Work out how you're traveling there and getting there. I fortunately live quite close to the assessment centre, so I could walk. But if you're getting public transport or you're driving, think ahead. They sort of let you in at the designated time. You put your bag in a locker. They sort of make sure they check your photo ID. They get you to sort of check through the sort of form and see that you understand what you're about to sit. And then they sit you down in front of a computer, and it's 190 questions. Then you get a break. You get to, for me, I got to sort of leave the assessment center, so I could take my bag and sort of go out, have a bite to eat, have a bit of water, review my notes. So I had flashcards I sort of flick through in that sort of hour-long break, and then went back and did the other 90 questions.
And you mentioned about have some water, because you can't even take a drink in.
Yeah, can't bring your water in. If you want to go water midway through, you have to put your hands up and ask.
I was going to comment on that part, and I'm going to try and do it without swearing and or getting angry, because I think the conditions are probably, well, I'm not going to be too brutal about the
Pretty
one of the
harsh.
hardest things I've done. Okay, they're horrible, but they're not horrible, but they're doable. But it is 2.5 hours. I don't know if it was just my center in particular, but it was meant to be an hour's break in between, and they asked us to come back like half an hour early. You can't drink water in the exam because it's on computer. And because there is only 1 minute and 40 seconds per question, then I didn't feel I had time to go get water, especially because there was no water fountain on my floor, which was, swear, say I shouldn't swear. I crammed as much food and drink as I could before starting the exam, early doors, so that I had a chance to get to the toilet before going into the exam, and then came out in that half an hour break and did the same, probably about 3 bottles of water, because you are staring at a screen for 2.5 hours, and then again for another 2.5 hours, and that's just the first exam, because then you get to do it all over again the week after. But yeah, they're hard, but that's what you're working for, isn't it?
Just to mention, in case it's relevant to anyone as well, if someone had perhaps reasonable adjustments due to learning needs, for example, whilst at university, it may well be that you can apply to the SRA for adjustments as well. So that's something you can make contact with the SRA before even taking up a preparation course, if you wanted to, just to find out what might be able to be put in place. But yeah, in general terms, it sounds like, you know, the assessments are pretty harsh, aren't they, really?
Yeah, they are difficult and sort of long. I think you do get more time than you maybe think. I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but some questions I was pretty able to just do like that, and it just took me 10 seconds, and then I can move on to the others. I personally find the best advice I sort of got given and sort of thought about was that if I didn't immediately know the question after reading through, I basically just like highlighted it and then I just moved on. And so that meant that like by the end of it, I maybe had like 50 odd questions I wanted to look back and go to, but it meant I got the easy ones out of the way, and I could spend more and more time on like the ones that were harder and harder. I found that worked for me. I don't know if that was anyone else.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, they are very difficult, and I think we wanted to come on this call and be open and be transparent with you guys, because there's nothing worse. As Alistair was saying, his friend, they were told that the MCQs are a lot easier, and then you get the fright of your life when you're in there. But I had time at the end of every single session to go back, and it is good. I'm not sure if any of you have sort of sat car theory driving tests. They're sort of centers like that, so you've got a screen, you've got sort of headphones that you can put on, and I found that really helpful because you can just sort of block out. You get given sort of a whiteboard with a pen. So I went in and listed sort of MCQs, and then I was going to tick next to it if I was happy, but then I realized, and as Alex was saying, that I hope it still does, but it used to have a function where you could flag if you were not sure, and at the end it sort of puts all those onto a screen and you can go into the ones that you flagged. You're running off adrenaline on that day, and I think if you have put in the work and you've done the MCQs, you've done some tests, you've gone over and over the content, it is more than doable. It can be quite an intense day. The other 2 points I just wanted to quickly add is check your ID, because you need 2 forms of ID, and I'm pretty sure it needs to be in date. The last thing you want to do is get to the test centre and be told you can't sit your exam because you have no valid ID. And Alex also touched upon it, getting there on time, because I think legally, if you're not there in the time that they prescribe you to be there, they can stop you from sitting the exam. And that's sort of just the last thing that you guys want.
Thanks, Sophie.
Just on that, sorry, I did forget one of my IDs on the first day, and they said to bring it back on the second day, so it was fine. But don't do it. Just you need 2 forms of ID, driving license and a passport, or something like that.
Brilliant, thank you. There's a few questions around LLM, and I'm going to show another slide shortly just about our courses, and I can touch upon that then. And then anything we've not been able to cover, I'll make sure that I get back to people about them to answer those questions. But any further kind of top tips or key takeaways that you think you need to make sure you share as well to anyone attending, guys?
I really like flashcards, especially ones you can literally just put in your pocket and just flick through as you're like waiting to get into the assessment center. Just having those to like just go through quickly, I think that's really beneficial. You know, you don't want to be fishing out your laptop or your phone or whatever, and like going through your notes on there outside the assessment center when it could be raining. Just just having something physical I find is quite good. But again, whatever you find easiest to study with.
I struggle in life with being a perfectionist and trying to think I need to learn every single thing. But as Soph said, and I actually got this tip from Soph because we both really struggled with the tax modules. And this is not me saying don't bother learning the tax modules because there are tax chapters or whatever, because there are 6 or 7 of them. But there were a couple of them that I just struggled so hard with. And it was so that made me realize those are literally 2 out of probably 150 chapters. So whilst I did learn them, read them, I didn't get too bogged down with doing them in comparison to everything. Because this is about breadth, whereas SQE2, you could get a longer question that is just focused on tax. So that's a different ballpark. But
Yeah, just don't be too hard on yourself, guys. I mean, you know, it is hard. The SQE is difficult. Do not start Googling articles and looking it up on LinkedIn where you'll just have loads of people who are complaining and who are just going to stress you out even more. It's challenging, it's difficult, but it's doable. It's more than doable. You guys have all gotten to this point. There is no reason that you can't pass the SQE. If you commit yourselves, if you're dedicated, if you put your hands up if you're struggling with something. As Al said, if you're getting stuck on a topic, don't just keep trying at it. Step away, maybe try something else, come back to it. Even if it's still not there, you know, there's plenty of other content that you will be tested on. So don't bog yourselves down and just speak up. The college is there, it's a support system. So use it and use all the tools that it has. Use all the MCQs, try them, you know, find a way that works for you to do it. As I said, for me, it was doing it once when I'd first gone over the content and then using it as a revision tool. If you fall behind on the summative ones, speak again to your support system at the college, and then, you know, try and go back and again use it as a revision tool. And finally, always feel free, as I've said, to reach out to us.
Yeah. Sorry, just really quickly I just feel bad about a couple of questions on there. Don't be scared about what people say online, because everyone has their own work rates. If you could handle sort of previous degrees with heavy workload, then if you think you can do this, then you can do it. It's about how much you put into it. And the same thing with doing the LLB over 2 years ago. I covered that earlier. I think is still beneficial, and it may just come back to you, but I don't personally think it's essential to have done the degree. Maybe just try and revisit a little bit of what you can.
Yeah, be confident in yourselves. You know, we've already had 3 trainees qualify through the SQE route. It's passable, it's doable. Don't get bogged down by what you hear and what you see, but also be aware that it's not a walk in the park, and you can't just walk into those exams having done no practice and expect to pass. I think there just quickly, there was a question earlier about sort of pass rates and how it's done. It's quite hard to answer that question, sorry, because it's done, I think, on the overall scores of people. I think that slightly affects it. But the point is that they also do need people to pass. So try not to get too hyperfixated on what percentage you need or how many right answers you need. I've always been like that. Every exam I've come out of, I've been like, well, I lost that mark. I've lost that mark. Don't put yourself through that. It's really hard to assess where the grade boundaries are. Just try and get your head down and try and first of all get through all of them, and then also be sort of confident in your answers too.
Yeah, agreed. Mock exams, the college did them, so they were really helpful. Sort of, like I said, most people I knew were always like having bits, depending on work, getting a little bit behind or back on track. But there were mock exams every, it was last year, I sat now, it was every 2 weeks, maybe
2 weeks.
month.
Yeah.
Yes, pass or fail.
Yeah.
But as we sort of said earlier, you might pass FLK1 and fail FLK2 and SQE1, and you'd only need to resit FLK2. So it's really, if you have a bad day on FLK1, pick yourself back up and go again, because you have that second chance with FLK2. And I'm sure most of the time it never goes as bad as we all think it does. And there's options that, if it doesn't go as well, it's not going to be the end of your legal journeys at all.
So just wanted to just cover a little bit about our different courses, as we mentioned them briefly already. So if someone hasn't got that law background at all, the starting point we would always recommend would be the graduate diploma in law first, which is a sort of short focus law conversion course really, and then to go on to the SQE1 preparation course, and then obviously following that from the SQE2. There is also another option to sit the LLM in legal practice programme, so that's a full master's degree, and that actually includes the SQE1 and SQE2 preparation courses as 2 of its modules. You would also have 2 additional transactional modules that you have a choice of different ones, and then you would study, you would also complete like a dissertation project, the capstone project for that as well. That can be funded with a postgraduate loan. So for those that are self-funding as opposed to going through a training contracts route with the support of an employer, you've got the options to either take the individual preparation courses, or you could take the LLM and fund it with a postgraduate loan if you wanted to as well. The full loan amount that you can take out, I believe, is just over £12,000, so that would actually cover the cost of our LLM as well as the SQE1 and 2 assessment fees as well. Just to show some upcoming start dates that we've got. So if you're looking at the SQE1 to study on the full-time 13-week course, we've got a start date at 8th of September, 22nd of September. Our 20-week one starts in the 4th of August, and both of those actually lead up to the January 2026 assessment period. All that longer length course, the 40-week one, starts on the 8th of September, which would then lead up to the July 2026 assessment period. So those are the sort of the different options if you're looking at just the preparation course. Or for the LLM, there's the 1-year programme or the 2-year programme. So the 1 year would actually include the 13-week SQE1 preparation course, so that's the sort of duration there. And the on the part-time LLM, you would sit the 20-week preparation course. So if you think actually you prefer the sound of that longer 40-week course, then you would look at the standalone version of that there.
Nicholas, someone's just asked have you seen it?
No, haven't. Thanks, Alistair. What was it?
So does the SQE1 prep cost, and 2, does it include the price of the exam itself?
It doesn't, no. So these are the costs for our individual preparation courses, or just for studying the LLM. But you do always book and pay the SRA separately for those SQE1 assessments. So you do have that to consider and to add on in terms of your fees. And one thing we didn't really probably mention earlier as well is those different test centres that you've said that you book onto. Actually, you could end up having a test centre that's further away, and you might need to think about certainly transport, but accommodation. Even if you're needing to get there quite early on, you might find that actually it would be better to stay overnight the night before. So that's all things to consider as well.
Sorry, that's one of my other tips as well, is just be clued up on the SRA website as to when the booking windows are. Now they've definitely gotten better since I first tried it. So I was actually on the 40-week course, but I started early, and then I went on the first day it opened. It opened for like 2 weeks. I went on at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and all the slots were gone across the entire country. Across all 4 countries in the UK, they were gone. and again fuming. But they made it better by the next time it came around. But just know in advance, don't sit on that when it's going to be, because you might be prepping for March or whatever, and you didn't know when they opened.
Yeah, and on the sort of cost front, I mean, I know Acuity, so for us, we're funded through the SQE, and some places that offer training contracts, but I understand that the college does also offer, am I right in saying this, Nick?
Say that again. I was distracted by the question coming through.
The college offers a scholarship
Yeah,
for financial
yeah,
support.
exactly. So there is a scholarship that has been launched now for SQE, whether you're studying the preparation courses or for the LLM. We have that available on our website now to apply for. There's a question that's coming about sponsorship for international students. So because we are a fully online law school, we're not able to sponsor visas for international students, but you obviously can study from wherever you are in the world. That's a good thing about sitting the SQE1 assessments as well. As we've mentioned, there are test centres sort of worldwide. When you do get to SQE2 though, unfortunately it is narrowed down, so that you would need to travel to attend those assessments, but you can study the preparation courses or for the LLM remotely. Well, thank you so much for everyone for joining this evening. I hope we managed to answer everyone's questions, but what I said, we'll be sending out an email hopefully tomorrow with a copy of the recordings and of the slides as well, and definitely we're happy to then pick up and answer anyone else's questions or anything else that anyone wants to know.
Yeah, thanks Nick for having us, and as we've said, always feel free to reach out for us. We've been there, we've been in your shoes, we know what it's like, and you might have some questions that come after this call, so please do feel free to reach out. But be confident, guys. The SRA do want solicitors to pass, so don't be bogged down. It is challenging, but it's more than doable.
Brilliant. Thanks so much everyone for joining. Have a good rest of your evening.